Howdy, howdy, howdy. Welcome to the latest edition of Baked in the Cake. It is March 13th, and if you are still alive, you're the ones listening to us. You have made it through the first wave of coronavirus.
If you're still alive and you haven't gone crazy yet.
And you haven't gone crazy. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah, my wife went to Sam's Club this morning. And I have intentionally been not freaking out and not going and buying stuff yet. And I was like, when we need it, in protest of people being crazy, we'll go buy it. Just when we need it.
Well,
if it's not there, it's not there.
Well, I work in the medical field, and I make a lot of visits to very vulnerable people.
Yeah.
And I can't get like sanitizer or anything for me to have after my visits.
Well,
and even like the suppliers to our medical suppliers at the hospices are out.
Yeah. So even like a lot of the people don't realize is that like a lot of the kids my wife teaches online right now they're medically fragile, and that's why they have to go to online school, and they can't even be in public like with people. So they can't get Clorox wipes, all the things that keep them alive. They can't get. And people are not realizing, like, other people really need this stuff. I saw for a bit, Joe Rogan had some fancy guy on his show kind of talking, the whole thing was about coronavirus. And I watched a little bit on there, and he was talking about how kind of what you're saying a little bit, medical suppliers or hospices, that everything's low on treatment. They don't have enough masks, they don't have enough anything. And he was saying that this is what he proposed. Now he's not thinking through a anarchist mindset like me, so I don't like the government doing anything. But you should have an anarchist opinion and a practical opinion. And my anarchist opinion is the government shouldn't do anything, but they're going to do something. So if they're going to do something, they should do this.
Well, yeah, like I was listening to Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
And I think he identifies as a libertarian.
Well, yes.
But he goes, in this case, this is kind of like the community coming together to all on the same page to protect each other.
Yeah.
And so, this is what government helping and, eliminating the payroll taxes for a bit to help, people covered to stay home. That's a good thing,
Well, what this guy proposed, or not really proposed, but he did propose it, but he's more pointing out how we don't do it already. He's like, why doesn't the government stockpile medical supplies in times where it's not needed highly? He's like, the government stockpiles guns and bullets out the wazoo. They can take any, they just...
A lot of it's perishable.
Ammo? Or medical supplies?
Yeah.
Mask and things like that are?
I think
Mask and gloves and...
Well, like sanitizer and...
Yeah, sanitizer probably would be. Well, he was specifically talking... I bet he's referring to... He's a smart guy.
We need stockpile of toilet paper.
Yeah. Stockpiling whatever, things that you can stockpile.
Right.
Because he was talking about how minimal... He's like, compared to the price that they're spending on stockpiling these weapons, he's like, this is nothing. It's like no-brainer when you look at the price differences.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he's kind of right. I don't like the government stockpiling weapons, and I don't like them stockpiling anything because the reoccurring maintenance on those is ridiculous. Like it costs. It frustrates me. Like you'll get reissued or old guns like 1911s, things like this.
But I mean, when do you stop stockpiling? I mean, should you stockpile vegetables if there's a famine? I mean,
well, you can't. But so
I know. Or foods.
Well, for the guns, it costs. They have all these old guns that are really awesome, and I'd love to own some of them. They're not even fully automatic either, and they just hold on to them for no reason. And it'll cost like $600,000 a year to keep these because of the AC and the facility and things like that. And they go for, since the 40s they've been doing it. So it's ridiculous. So even if you do have medical supplies, there's an ongoing cost to stockpile this stuff. What's interesting about vegetables, I've told Kelsey this, is 'cause we want to start like a garden and stuff, but now that I've not working at the house anymore, we probably can. But you can just in a very small amount of space, you'll produce more vegetables than you could ever eat as far as food goes. So that's something that I don't think you need a stockpile. But so like people who do vegetables often get into canning. You got to figure out something to do with those vegetables.
Anyway, it's crazy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I did want to talk about a little bit before we get into the real subject today. That it is related to the coronavirus because I wanted to hear your thoughts on it. It's a libertarian debate around it. Does restricting gatherings of 100 or 250, like some states have done, bigger than that, violate the Fifth Amendment? But does it mostly, in my opinion, violate the First?
The right to assemble?
Yeah. And I just thought that was a good question to raise. I didn't get to research as much on it as I wanted, but a friend of mine shared an article, and he is 100% on the same page as me. It's kind of weird how much we agree on everything. And he was saying that it's not against the First Amendment because it's constitutional for sure. Is it still violating your rights? Maybe. The Constitution doesn't perfectly protect your rights, yes, but it's constitutional, and it might be necessary too. But
I don't see much protest. I haven't heard much protest over the First
I
Amendment.
want to protest. I do.
Well,
but I'm
like,
rebellious.
Something that I'm watching right now, like I had just checked this, like even right before we started this podcast, was our symphony. I play in a symphony. We're supposed to play at the Hayes Performing Arts Center, and Hayes County just now limited. They're not allowing their facilities to be used for anything outside educational purposes now. And, so I'm like, we have it tomorrow night.
Yeah.
And we've been practicing, 3 months now for this concert. And, I mean, it looks like it's going to be canceled because it's at the Hayes Performing Arts Center. It's at a school performing arts center.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty much sure it's going to be canceled, but they haven't announced it yet. I don't, honestly, I don't care.
About it being canceled or?
No, about
assembling
things being canceled.
Oh, things being canceled?
Okay, that's my opinion. So to engage the argument, though, I think when it's done to protect people, and it's not done in a violent way or a way that's purposely trying to put people off or discriminate, then I'm okay with it. I haven't thought about the topic much, but I don't have a big deal about it.
Allow me to get conspiratorial.
Okay, go for
it.
For fun.
Just for fun. I don't really believe this for if Hillary Clinton's listening. So isn't this always how the government gains more power, is by seizing on a tragedy and people trading liberty for security?
Okay,
and it's a false sense of security.
So I did have this thought about that with all the emergency things that the government's doing, like allowing like more access to medical for people that have the virus. What if at the end or when it lightens up, they don't go back?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
They don't, like, this is setting up, a new bar, so it'll just stay. It'll just stay in power. I mean,
that's what I'm scared of.
it's kind of going off like the podcast last time when we talked about Star Wars. He was granted, Palpatine was granted emergency power so that he could deal with the Clone Wars.
That's a good connection.
And
I like it.
And then stayed in power.
That's hilarious.
And so, I know it's a callback to last time, but Like I did have that thought. What if they don't go back? What if now schools are all going to be online?
Yeah.
They find it's less expensive.
Yeah.
They find that they're more profitable.
Yes.
And so now they're just going to go to online school. What if it doesn't come back?
Yeah. Well, they have a huge influx of applications for my wife's online schools, and they're like, we can't take all of you, but the people who are in charge of it want to. They're trying to do it. So yeah, that's interesting. But talking about Star Wars again, one of our listeners reached out to me about our Star Wars talk last time. He goes by Kyle Schumacher.
Okay, so he was our guest on like our second or third podcast.
Our second or third. He's probably listening to this. And he had many disagreements with our conversation.
Very good.
And he was telling me about it over text. But I told him, I said, you're just going to have to come on the podcast and tell me.
Yeah.
Because I had no idea. I've talked about Star Wars with him a little bit, but I had no idea that he had so much opinions about this.
He's not an Empire fan then.
No, I don't think so. He kept on reminding me that blowing up planets with billions of people on them is bad. And I'm like, you just got to ignore that. Just ignore that one thing.
Yeah.
But so he had some interesting perspectives. And he even had some stuff to say about the genre.
Okay. Like
about
the science,
sci-fi and fantasy and stuff. And actually, I'm just curious how, that's what we need to have on the podcast, is I'm curious how he was already so informed on that type of thing, because it was new for me. I don't hear anyone talking about that stuff. So hopefully we'll have a follow-up podcast with him on here. If we can get him here. Might have to record it on late evening, but it will be good discussion. So on the docket for today, I have been, just in recent discussions with other people, it's been coming up. It's weird how one subject will come up separately, even when I don't initiate it with multiple people. And it's weird to me. So I like to talk about it when that kind of thing happens, because I'm like, I guess it's on me right now. And so I have identified, and I did this in college, and I hadn't talked about it since college. And I think you might have talked about it a little bit whenever we were talking about Bethel on one of the last podcasts.
Yeah, about worship.
Yeah, about worship. But I have 3 logical fallacies about church worship. Or maybe I'm still organizing them. Maybe it's not 3. But I have 3 words for sure that we don't like.
Okay.
That aren't bad. And I thought I intentionally didn't say anything about it until now, because I wanted to hear your unedited opinion.
All right.
So I'm going to give you the 3 words. Performance is 1. Entertainment is 2.
Mm-hmm.
In concert is 3.
Okay.
Can you think of any more off the top of your head?
No. Well, I think we did talk a little bit about this.
A little bit, but I was when you brought it up, I was like, man, I hadn't talked about that in forever. Mm-hmm. I dealt with this type of thing all the time in college. I was constantly having to remind people this, but it wasn't not even remind. It was teaching them. I was teaching people this, but I was the only one. I felt like I was the only one who believed it.
If I remember right, you said that you think worship is a performance.
Yeah. Yeah, so if we start with performance, what all of these get down to is semantics, all of them. And I had to, before I wanted to talk with a lot of people about this, I double-checked myself on the definition of semantics, which is a ironic thing to do, but it's not, I just don't like how people say, oh, that's just semantics.
Yeah.
To dismiss something. I think semantics is important. So whenever I'm talking about semantics, I'm not dismissing someone else's argument. Mm-hmm. I think what we're talking about is important.
Well,
so
the difficulty, okay, go ahead and do the definition.
It's the meaning of a word, phrase, sentence, or text.
Right. And the problem nowadays is that everybody's got their own version of the definition.
Yeah.
the right side, the right wings, the left wing, the Republicans, Democrats have their own definitions of words, like feminism, for example.
Oh yeah.
Like
doesn't mean what it used to.
right. I mean, and depending on what side you are, it has a particular meaning.
Yeah.
And there's other things like that. So, are you saying calling worship a performance is a matter of semantics, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we don't like is calling worship a performance, because we don't want it to. And a lot of this comes back to this point too, because we don't have a works-based faith.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, works-based faith. So we don't want to, kind of insinuate that we're doing anything, because nothing we do is worthy. But just by basic definition of performance, it's a performance.
Mm-hmm.
So what I was pushing back against a lot in college, I was like, makes it really hard to be good performers. I was like, if we won't acknowledge what we're doing, then we won't ever be good at it.
Right.
And I was like, so we need to get over this.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but you might need to explain that.
Yeah, I'm going to.
Okay.
So anytime you get up on a stage with the microphone, you're performing. Anytime you're doing something, an act in front of someone else, and they're just watching you, you're performing. The performance, it can be even more basic than that, to perform a procedure on a patient. It's a performance.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't need to be, if we're honest to the definition of performance, then we don't need to be scared of it. But we also need to know that our faith isn't based on our performance, because we're going to fail every time. And there's, all things we bring to God are like filthy rags. And anything that we do apart from God is done in vain. And anything good done through us was done through the Spirit. And it was, so all the glory goes to God.
Right. I mean, I think we see that in churches, right? So different churches are more performance-oriented than others.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, they'll spend money on the way the stage looks, paid band members, and even personality preachers.
Mm-hmm.
To have,
who are better performers,
right?
Yeah.
Or at least better performers in the fact that maybe they speak more articulately, or they're educated a certain way, they're engaging, or funny.
Yep.
And so my question is, though, can someone still worship through we'll use band, because we're talking about the worship context.
Yes.
Can someone still worship even though people are performing on stage?
Yeah, they should be. And one of the things that I realized, it was frustrating me, because I've read so many books, and they always got a chapter, and it's going to be called "Worship is Not a Performance." And they're going to go through this whole big thing, how it's not a performance, not a performance, not a performance. And I'm like, okay, what you just did is denied people their worship, if what you're saying is true. Any act, us singing together is a performance. Us singing alone to God is a performance for God. And what's special, and even so whenever I try to find things to be logically consistent, and that kind of makes me crazy sometimes. And sometimes people don't understand why, and I don't either. But to be logically consistent, so you're playing your French horn. Mm-hmm. And I sat through lots of solo concerts for orchestra instruments. And we're supposed to do all things for the glory of God, and constantly, through our life, worship Him. Offer our life as a living sacrifice, and everything we do, worship God.
This is our spiritual act of worship.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you should be doing that as worship to God. So, but it's a French horn recital, solo recital, done all classical music, whatever you want. It should be done in honor and glory and worship of God. Well, so for me to say that's a performance and it's not worship, it's not even your personal worship. Well, I think that's wrong.
Well, okay. So when I play the French horn, I was at a practice last night. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned they're supposed to have a concert tomorrow. It's probably going to be canceled. honestly, I'm not thinking God in this. But you bring up a good point.
Yeah,
Like
it should be. It should be.
Right.
We're not perfect.
But let me give you an example of something that happened to me this week,
Okay.
Worship-wise. And I mean, look, I'm not perfect, so I think this will kind of say a little bit about me. I already told you about the good news that I had, and I just received some good news. That's all I can leave that at.
Yeah.
For public, but. It was really good news. I had asked the group to pray for me on Sunday night, and we prayed together, and then something great happened Monday, and and I was praising God. I was praising God. It was all Him, and because I mean it was something completely unexpected that took place, and so during that work praising God, I felt led to listen to worship music.
Okay.
And which is kind of, I mean, it says a little something about me, right? So, something good happens, then I worship. That's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be,
what?
praising all the time.
Oh,
right?
well, no. I think that's biblical. But go on.
So I was praising God for what happened and listening to, to worship music. But something happened to me while I was listening to the worship music I was actually listening to the words. Usually I sing along, trying to find the harmonies, and because sometimes there's songs that we do in our worship band, and so I'm trying to listen to harmonies. I'm trying to. I think on some of the songs you already sent out for this week, and I was trying to listen to. My mind is engaged into the different parts of the music, and I realized that I do that probably 99% of the time I listen to worship music. Mm-hmm. I'm listening to the performance.
Yeah.
And this week, every day this week, from Monday through Friday, which is the day we're recording, I was actually letting the words speak to me, and I was disappointed in myself because of how much the words actually spoke to me. Mm-hmm. Like the actual lyrics. And how much I just messed out on that.
Yeah.
Because I was always thinking musically. Mm-hmm. And so even though a band was performing that at some point down the road, and I had always engaged it as a practice for my future performance, this week it was worship.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Well, I think both are worship. But I think it's different aspects of it.
Sure, maybe it was just more meaningful.
Yeah,
because this week.
I mean, we gotta to prepare for worship is another place you are sacrificing parts of your life for God, and it might feel like work, not worship. Mm-hmm. You don't feel like you're necessarily experiencing God in those times sometimes, but. Hopefully it pays off, and you help other people worship. And say if you're leading, and hopefully you can worship with them at that time too. So you're not just performing so they can worship.
Well, I mean, even when we talk about the word worship, sometimes I don't know if we dig into the word. I think there's a lot of words that we use in Christian circles and churches, like glory, like hallelujah, like grace, and these words.
Oh, I think
holy,
grace has lost almost all meaning.
So all these
on Christian
words,
radio.
Well, I mean, we use it so much that and it just kind of pours out of our mouth. And do we really know what those words mean, especially when it comes to worship? And what does it really mean to worship? Mm-hmm. What is worship, if we had to define it?
Worship is by basic. So people they define worship in all those books too. And I used to have my own spin on this definition, but I'm going to give you the basic one, the best one I've heard. And it's by a super charismatic guy, and people have criticized him for a lot of stuff. So if anyone has an opinion about him, keep it to yourself. I don't care.
Yeah, we can take the good stuff.
We'll take the good stuff. Yeah. And he Rick Muchow.
Never heard of him.
From Saddleback Church. And
okay, Rick Warren's church.
And Yeah, so Rick Muchow, and his definition, I met him at a conference, actually led worship with him at the conference. It was pretty fun. And his is faith expressed. That's it. 2 words. And I used to, I had a spin on that, and it was good too. I was thinking about the other day how I couldn't think of it because I haven't been teaching it lately. But
see, I'm a little challenged with that definition. Maybe it's because the word faith is in there. Because a faith is another one of those words,
yeah.
right? That,
you got it on that. By the way you're looking at it, you're right.
But love expressed is how I thought of it.
Oh, that's not bad.
Because like the picture I get in my mind, okay, this has nothing really to do with Christianity. Is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom?
Yeah.
People are like bowing down, and like they're worshiping whatever god or person they're worshiping. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Yeah.
With the jewels and stuff. The stones that he was going after. I don't know.
I rewatched them all.
Yeah, but that image kind of comes to mind, and there's a 5th one coming out soon.
Really?
Yeah, they're in production now.
I love it.
Yeah, or pre-production. I'm not sure.
I liked the newer ones better, but
you liked 4?
Yeah. Is that the one?
Crystal Skull.
Is that the one with Shia LaBeouf?
Yes.
Yeah, I like that one a lot, actually.
I thought that was the corniest of them all.
Oh, maybe, but I'm not watching it for. It's a different type of movie. I didn't like the old ones that much.
All right, back to we can have an Indiana Jones podcast or something. So, worship, expression of love, and the thing that I was thinking about is like when we're up on stage performing. Is it more important that we're worshiping, or that individually people are finding their place of worship?
Well,
their expression of love through song.
I would say you, because you can't control what they're doing. People misinterpret things all the time, and sometimes it's okay that they did, because you're a pastor, you know this. You preach a sermon, and people receive it in a completely different way than even what you were intending.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But it was really what God wanted them to receive.
Okay, the best ones are the ones that think that you were preaching about them.
Yeah.
And then they get offended.
And then you weren't preaching about them. So, yeah.
And sometimes you do.
Yes. But, so, yeah, I think that's okay. But, yeah, so I don't want to deny people their worship. And we should worship through all of our performance, actually. Let's raise the bar. Every time you perform, you should be worshiping. So I do think they're lowering it. This is where we talked about it, is I've always heard worship's not a performance, so it's okay to suck.
Right.
And that was one of the other things.
It was an excuse not to practice.
It was an excuse not to practice. Yeah. And to not even not to practice, but if you make a mistake, you didn't try to not make that mistake again.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't try to fix anything. I thought that was strange. If you make a mistake, it's okay, because worship's not a performance. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, you should care. Do you care that you made a mistake? Right. That doesn't make sense.
And I think kind of along those lines, something I was thinking about also, and I was trying to make notes while we were talking because I didn't want to lose this, is that sometimes I think we over-spiritualize, the performance, or okay, the example I'll use is as a pastor.
Okay.
I think sometimes, and I want to be careful how I say this, because I do believe God works in it, but a lot of what I would preach about is stuff I studied, and not necessarily just like this spiritual Holy Spirit vomit into my life.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or this is a word that I've been contemplating lately, is the calling of a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, no, you're hiring a pastor.
Well,
And like, okay, I mean, so
I think
looking
it's
at it
both.
biblically, well, maybe, yeah, for sure. Like God's in it, God's sovereign,
Yeah.
But like I was kind of looking at this today because there's some people I follow on Twitter a little bit that are, and not really to join them in their case, but about pastors being rehired after they were child molesters
Yeah. Yeah.
as a pastor, and
Yeah.
then they go to a different church and they're rehired,
Yeah.
and somebody like I was reading today, but obviously they're called to this church and called in quotes that this person who had pastored at another church who had sexually molested some youth
Mm-hmm.
years later gets to pastor at a different church
Mm-hmm.
because he's called.
Yeah.
And
Was he like making fun of the word called?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's what I was. Yeah. You can
He
lose.
was
some of
using the
that through
called sarcastically.
Yeah, text.
And
well, people do abuse that. That's for sure. Abuse the spiritual aspect of it.
mhm.
What I see with that, just as a little bit of a tangent, it might be worth. I think it's worth it though. One thing I never wanted to do was have being a pastor as a career. I'm like, if I'm called to be at 100-person church for the rest of my life and just be the music minister, or just be the part-time music minister, or the volunteer, then if that's what I'm called to do, I'll do it.
Right.
But if I'm called out of it, I'm also going to leave.
Right, and I think the problem, like that.
But pastors,
what I'm trying to figure out,
jumping churches back and forth is where I usually have an issue.
Well, what I'm having trouble with, like I know, and I'm still examining the word for this, and maybe you can help me. Maybe you know it. Is where in the Bible does it say a pastor's called to a church? Like there's this spirit, like the way it's always been, the way it was presented to me in seminary, the way it was. I've heard it used in the past. Is like there's this like like supernatural calling, and what makes that the case? Like
I would have to say that you're not going to find a direct Bible verse to that.
But I mean, so is it possible we say that a pastor's called somewhere just to kind of push it up there a little bit on the platform? Make the it seem a little bit more special.
I don't know. I don't think so. But I think it's still okay for doing that. I think it's just acknowledging God's sovereignty in our lives. And I think to be called to ministry is different a little bit, vocational ministry, and you can make a case for that.
Well,
biblically.
then you get into the thing where pastors in many churches are elected.
What do you mean?
Well, the church votes on it.
Well, I don't agree with that.
Well, I don't know, but it's all playing into this. Was he called or was he elected into the position?
Well, so
I'm playing with
the election confirms the calling.
Right, and elections all over the Bible, right?
Well, no. So, like I said a minute ago,
I don't. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
I don't like churches voting on really anything,
right.
But that's the way we do it, and I just put up with it.
Well, so I mean, but scripturally, I mean, it's better to throw dice.
Yes.
And have
probably.
the dice select the pastor.
Yeah.
But then why interview him? Just cast the dice when they walk in the door.
I think you could.
Or do it over the phone.
Why don't we do that? I'm just saying.
So
who are we gonna fire?
Because here's my thing. Like this is where this is just something that I think on, and I don't at all deny God's sovereignty and God's hand in things.
Yeah.
Like He's in control. He's even in control if someone who says they're called but don't really feel it comes to a church. He still has His hand in it.
Yeah.
But I was faced with a dilemma or a choice of two options a while back when we were called to missions.
Yeah.
And I think I told you this story before. Well, it was either Africa with the IMB, which we were already in interviews with, and or go to Canada to be a pastor. And we were like, which way do we go? Or which one is God calling us to? And we sought advice from some from people we consider wise counselors, and what I ultimately felt, and I felt God say to me was, it doesn't matter, just go.
Yeah.
Go. We're commanded to go make disciples. So it doesn't matter if you got the calling or not. Go.
I think that's true for everyone.
Right. And so
there's a general calling.
Right.
And I think that people, so, we might want to redefine calling in different kinds of scenarios.
Okay. So I want to take the scenario back to worship.
Okay.
And so, I think this is probably more in play with more charismatic churches, where like the worship part of the service, I'm talking about the music,
it's possibly like really like more important. Yeah.
Right. It's like, like there was one song that I was listening to. I don't know if it was Bethel or it's probably Bethel, where it's like the Holy Spirit's coming. And then all of a sudden during the song gets to this very high point, and the Holy Spirit's here among us. I forgot the song. I don't even remember.
Is it Holy Spirit?
Oh, no, it's not that one.
Okay.
No, it's a different one. But it's like pronouncing the Holy Spirit here now.
Yeah.
But matched along with the song, like getting more intense, more, and then, maybe it was, I don't know if it was minor chords, and then all of a sudden it turns major, and then it's like lights come on, and, and it's like the Holy Spirit's now present. And like, I don't know. I mean, is that over spiritualizing this worship when it comes down to it, it's when worship should be an expression of how I love God, and this is how I'm going to express that I love Him, together with everyone else.
Okay. Well, I think we typically under spiritualize worship, but
okay.
I mean, you're in communication, showing love to the Creator of the universe, who is in control of everything and sovereign over all and never fails and has effectually called you to the faith. I think we like, especially in American churches, we don't get excited about that.
Okay, I see where you're coming from here.
And the supernatural aspect that we're connecting with the supernatural.
Yeah. Okay, I see where you're coming from.
So, where are you coming from? Is it different?
No, no. I think we're talking about the same exact thing, but I think you're right. Like, I think a lot of churches, I agree with you.
Now the theology,
because I was pointing out probably a different extreme to the same thing.
Now the theology of what you were just talking about, I might have a problem with.
Okay.
To suddenly declare that the Spirit is here, is kind of weird.
Well, no. So I think that's another extreme to the same thing.
Okay.
And I was pointing out the extreme case, the extreme charismatic idea, like that, like worship is providing this atmosphere of the Spirit, and so I think what I was expressing is an extreme.
They're the exception. You don't make rules based on the exception.
But I think you're saying the same thing except on the other end.
Yeah.
Where, it's just dry, and people are thinking more technical. What's being sung.
And
how
this
it sounds.
Is a great segue into the second word. And maybe the last one won't take that long, hopefully. I don't know how long we've been going, but the second word is entertainment.
Okay.
So people say it's not entertainment. I'm like, yeah, it is. Guess what? Everything that we say up here is somewhat entertaining you. If it wasn't entertaining you, you wouldn't listen. I mean, entertainment, we're just engaging you. Don't think of it as a bad word. But
I think we're getting the semantics of the word entertainment now.
Yeah, that's okay. Remember? So entertainment, I do think it is a problem, though. In its basic definition, I think it's a problem. I don't think we should be scared of it. People use it wrongly, but I've kind of noticed it's a problem in different ways, I guess. So typically, whenever you hear that someone didn't like the music, or they'll say, I didn't worship today because of something you played, or I don't like the...
They were saying they weren't entertained,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's all. That's all it was. And I've heard from those same people on a Sunday, let's say someone who does hymns a lot, likes hymns. I've heard from those same people on a Sunday where we did less hymns than the other Sunday. The Sunday we did lots of hymns, they didn't like it. And the Sunday that we performed well and entertained them, that they did like it. And it wasn't ever about the style of music. So it was about whether they were entertained.
I guess the problem is that different people have different ideas of what it is to be entertained.
Yeah. And
so if we're catering to one type of entertainment over another, or I think, because if you're saying entertainment's not necessarily a bad thing, well, then should you stick around if you're not entertained?
Yeah, well, this is where we're going to get into a little bit about. It really comes down, and this applies to performance too, is the heart, and we cannot control people's hearts in worship. We just can't. We can't even control our own hearts. You know, we just pray that God continues to make us new and give us a new heart, and that loves Him. So we need to approach it that way, but we don't have... I am not here merely, that's an important word, for entertainment. And people approach it as if that's all I'm here for. And that's the way I receive a lot of criticisms. I'm like, I'm not here for your entertainment. I'm here to help us worship and worship together. They forget that it's communal worship. And I'm like, I'm here to worship together. It's going to be entertaining. If it wasn't, it'd be horrible. You don't want it if it's not entertaining.
Right.
But you're going to have to remember, if it's not actually about the entertainment, that's not why we're here. We're here for the worship. Entertainment's a part of it. Performance is a part of it. They're both a part of it, but we're here for God.
Well, I think
we're
some
here because
people
we love God,
use entertainment as a bad word.
Yeah, all the time. But they'll only use it, remember, they only use it against whatever music that they don't like.
Well, again, I'm going back to kind of preaching.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, there's great illustrations through preaching.
Right. I mean, if it's a boring speaker, then he's not entertaining.
Well, what's an illustration?
Right. Yeah.
A story to entertain you. Maybe it actually might help you get it better. It's okay. It's okay to entertain. But we just need to remember that's not why we're here, is to be entertained. Stop telling jokes in your preaching. Get rid of everything comical. Get rid of, speak monotone.
But again, that's used to as an excuse to be boring.
Yeah, some people, yeah. I mean, you have to entertain people. You do. There has to be, especially... In music, you can see it, but it's harder for me to think of like a black and white scenario of like entertaining and not entertaining with music, because slow songs and fast songs are both entertaining. But with preaching, a monotone preacher is not going to entertain very well.
Right.
A boring preacher isn't really going to be that effective in delivering the gospel, possibly.
Well, I'll be honest. I'm not as entertained through hymns.
Yeah, it's true, but it's okay.
Yeah, because you only do like one.
Yeah, because only like one or two. Two on a big Sunday. But, that's part of why when we're worshiping, we need to worship because we love each other. I'm putting aside my preferences because I love my brother and sister in Christ that has different preferences also. Corporate worship is different than private worship. But entertainment is another, logical fallacy of it being a bad thing. Performance and entertainment. And I think, so I don't know do you have anything else to say on entertainment for me?
Well, just that... what you're saying is entertainment's not necessarily a bad thing. Like we sometimes make it out to be like you're sitting at home watching TV and neglecting other things, or it's something that's brain numbing, like you're entertained by your phones or Facebook or something like that.
Yeah.
So you're not using it in that kind of.
But we don't
context.
like entertain, just like we don't like performance, because it kind of performance connects to a works-based faith, and entertainment. We feel like it connects to a selfish. Now we're worshiping us.
Yeah.
We're not worshiping God, and we're worshiping us, and that can happen for sure. But remember, we can't stop people from doing that. We would have to stop. You take it to the next extreme, and get rid of anything that someone could worship on stage.
Right.
So, the next one is concert. Concert is the last one, and they say it's not a concert. I'm like, how is it not? We have microphones, drums, electric guitars, musicians singing, like lights. It's loud. What? How is this not a concert? And when you over there with it being a concert, but I went, music school. I had concerts that were solo, violin, solo
like recitals.
Yeah, recitals, but it's a concert, and we'd say you get concert credit for going, and solo vocalists with piano, and the horrifying screech of a clarinet, and so I'm like, this is a concert. So is the guy doing traditional music. That's a concert. People pay to see that, even nowadays. They'll go to a Southern, a gospel concert and to hear.
I was offered to be paid to go play French horn on Easter.
Okay,
I'm not, but
okay,
but I mean, so that would have been a gig. That would have been for me it would have been a gig, because especially when I'm playing my horn, like you said, everything we should do. We do should be for the Lord.
Yes.
And just being honest, that hasn't crossed my mind while playing my horn.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is it should be. Everything we do should be for the Lord.
Yeah. So concert is just another bad word that shouldn't be. I'm like, this is a concert. You can worship at a concert. I say we went to the Hillsong concert and worshiped together as a church.
Well, I think maybe one of the reasons, and this is kind of coming back to the over-spiritualization, is that when you use the word performance, entertain, and concert, it doesn't sound spiritual enough.
Yeah, maybe.
Right?
Yeah, it's too basic.
Right.
Well, you're right, and I hate saying this, but it does feel like...
With them, right?
Well, no, that too, jeez. I feel very judgmental when I say this, but people often use those as places to hide thinking they know theology. But it's actually, those are shallow perspectives. That's a better way to put it. I think those are very shallow perspectives, and worship is so much more deep than that. And understanding worship more deep leads to better worship. Orthodox theology leads to orthodox doxology. So I hate to say that the mass opinions of that is shallow, because some people, even after hearing my arguments, are going to stick to theirs. And I don't want them to think that I think less of them, but I just don't see how, I don't think it's honest to Scripture.
Well, I think maybe one way we can look at it is that you can have a performance with God involved or without God involved.
Yeah.
You can have entertainment with God involved, without God involved.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a game night, and so we had fellowship. That was entertainment.
It was great.
Right. And then you can have a concert.
Yes.
Geared toward God or geared without God. Christian music or not Christian music.
Yeah, and so a concert's another just bad word, but it's, people would pay to see it. It's a concert. I don't think that's something to be ashamed of. Or I hate that we think we need to make excuses.
Right.
Just be honest. It's a concert. It's entertainment. It's a performance. Once we can be honest about these things, I think it's freeing. and it's it's freeing for the musician.
I think that view on those words is a minority in churches, and I mean just because baked in the cake ideas of what you know the spiritual depth worship should be perceived as.
Yeah, and what this really frustrated me with, and this is why it's so hard for me during college, is because I really felt like God's calling me to be creative and to create something beautiful. And the glory of that is that he accepts it. You know, like it's for his glory, and there's nothing that I could do, but he allowed me to worship him, and he accepted my worship. That's such grace and mercy happening right there. You know, he's calling us to this. So, and I felt like, you know, part of being creative is like that too, but a lot of times we expect our worship ministers to be creative and to be entertaining, but not too creative. Don't be too creative, because now it's about you. Don't be too entertaining. Entertain me, but entertain me in just the right way. Oh, by the way, all the other 100 people in this room also have a slightly different way they want to be entertained, and it's got to be just right. And I'm like, they're the ones making about performance and entertainment and not worship. I'm like, give your worship pastors freedom to create something that we can all have, you know, but also be creative. So don't get mad at them when they do something creative. I don't add a new verse to a song or a chorus. And, I mean, if we held up Christian musicians, especially worship musicians, to the same standard that we hold like secular Christian musicians for entertainment of any kind, even artists. Artists can be as creative as they want on the canvas. When do we start telling artists don't hit that high note, the equivalent of that? You know, I don't want to, it's like in saying it's not a performance, so don't be too good. I'm like, I'm supposed to not worship as much. I'm not offering my whole body as a living sacrifice. I'm like, so it's not based, you want me to play worse? I'm like, I'm not going to play worse. I'm not. It needs to be tasteful. You know, just because, you know, technical skill isn't necessarily what makes it worse. It needs to be tasteful. It needs to be good. But it really, I think, puts worship ministers in a really tight spot because you're supposed to be creative. You're supposed to perform well. They expect you to perform well. I had performance reviews. Why did we call it performance reviews? Because it's a performance.
Right.
Right. I'm supposed to perform well, but not too well. So start entertain, but just right, and don't entertain too much. And then I'm supposed to be.
So you're saying that you feel like there's sometimes worship leaders get bound up.
Well,
by kind of unwritten rules and
judged unfairly. It mostly just being judged unfairly. But you know, if you're a worship minister or pastor, even though you know these things are true, if you acknowledge these things to be true, you need to understand that not everyone's there. And you're also called to love them and teach them. And that didn't happen in one conversation either. So they're going to say some things, and not everyone's ever going to be on the same page, because it's baked in the cake in our culture to think of these things in this way.
I don't know if a lot of churches really teach.
They don't teach this.
Because of the difficulty to articulate.
Yeah, it's really difficult to articulate. And people want to, I mean, like, me and you have a great relationship, and we've, like, you trust a lot of what I say. But if it was a different person here, we'd be arguing a lot. You know, we would. This wouldn't be an easy conversation. I argued with a lot of people about this type of stuff throughout college, and so yeah, it's not something that people are going to just accept lightly.
No, they hold it pretty firmly.
Oh yeah, they're going to hold it firmly because, well, they think this is the proper worship of God. So that's a good thing. If you think something's the proper worship of God, you probably should stick to it. But we need to just remember that we're all at different places, and you're called to. Sometimes you're not called to just, as a worship pastor, you're not called to just lead them in worship on Sundays, but teach them
what
worship is.
You know, there needs to be a lot of grace.
Yes.
In a lot of things.
Yeah, we need to give grace to each other.
I'm using the word grace and giving each other a little bit of, like, not in the word like a gift, but in the use of being a little bit more, approaching somebody a little bit more flexible, a little bit more freely, when things aren't so clear. And I think sometimes we get really firm on our preferences or our ideas, where it kind of hurts others. And so I think the reason why I was kind of going down this road is because you were kind of referencing an idea about everybody's on a journey, and not everybody sees things like I do, and nor should I really expect them to be exactly where I am theologically. I'm not trying to lift myself up.
No, you're right. Though.
But and I don't see things like they do because we approach things through different lenses.
Yeah.
We have different church backgrounds. Somebody that's tightly wound around hymns probably was raised in the church, that they have memories of growing up in a church singing hymns, and where I wasn't. And the first church I went to was contemporary. Yeah. And so that's my exposure to worship. That's the way I was taught to worship. And so to hold something too firmly where we don't treat each other good about our preferences, it's just a lack of compassion and understanding where someone else is coming from.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all about the perspective. But I just thought this was a topic. I felt like I'd put it together a little bit better than I had ever done in the past, because I was like, I really have identified 3 words that are, bad words to a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's baked in the cake in many churches.
It's very baked in the cake. People, this is, and it's kind of strange because it's like, I don't know where I can pinpoint it to. Like, where did this come from? And I don't know where, because it didn't probably start till, if you look through church history, I bet you could say it was off and on, because there were high performance areas where this might have not ever been a topic. But they always would do, different things, like maybe hide the choir, put the choir in the back so you only hear their voices, so it's not about the choir, So the church is always in strange things, and sometimes for saying it's not about the people and performance, but performing very well at the same time.
Well, we mentioned earlier about like the symphony I play in, and for Christmas we played Handel's Messiah, and there's this, I guess it's a YouTube video. It's a trend that people are doing with where people dress up as monks.
Okay.
And I'll show you a video of it later, but they hold up signs that say hallelujah, like, different parts. So,
yeah.
And so, like, I think that was written as a worship song.
Hallelujah, Handel's Messiah?
Yeah.
Yeah, it comes out of a mass.
But never, just this show you how I kind of disassociated worship with the symphony. While we were playing that, I never once considered this as a worship song.
Well,
it was a performance.
Yeah, as you're in the symphony.
But it was a performance, performing with the symphony. And most of the songs we do are secular. We did How the Grinch Stole Christmas as one of our songs, and many other secular Christmas songs. And but my heart wasn't at a place of worship to see that this was a worship song.
Well,
but I'll think about that from now on.
I want you to think about every time you see a composer, and ask yourself, or Google it, not just ask yourself, because you might not know, was he a church musician? Because most of our great composers were funded by the church, and they were church musicians. And because the church, Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, is for the longest time was the state, and was the only place that had money to have live music. Like, this is so a lot of our musicians historically, especially from like the Baroque period, so 1600 to 1750, then classical and romantic,
like
even
Bach and
Bach, Mozart, Handel, they're all church musicians, and yeah. So we don't actually have that many recordings or information from European culture. That is, we're kind of we're neglecting most of the world when we're talking about history of music right now. But so through European Western civilization, other than the church, because after that in my church, in my music history classes, you're looking at like monks. You're not really, which is monk singing is crazy, and Gregorian chants and things, and they're still discovering a lot of music and the way music is formed and things. They don't notate things the same. They don't have all the notes. So it's really interesting how the church is the ones who's funded that, throughout history. But think about how, not everything they wrote was for worship, but how creative a lot of these musicians were. And they also had restrictions on them too, because they couldn't play things too crazy or whatever. So I find that to be interesting.
Yeah, good topic.
Yeah, good topic. So we didn't get into, we've been pushing back over and over and over again. One day we're going to talk about hallucinogens. I want to talk about DMT and...
it's going to be one of those things like Jimmy Kimmel. Have you ever seen that where he says, Matt Damon, we don't have time for Matt Damon today? That's kind of his running thing that we ran out of time for Matt Damon.
Oh, so we can't have Matt Damon on. That's funny.
It's going to be one of those things we just keep pushing.
Yeah, well, and Matt Damon, he gets made fun of a lot now, right? Like it's like a side joke or inside joke for like Hollywood to make fun of Matt Damon. I actually saw some stuff like that. It's funny to make fun of Matt Damon. Okay, so maybe we in the future we'll have Matt Damon on and we'll talk about that. So, all right. Well, I think that's all we got for you today, folks. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe if you can do any of those things on whatever platform you're listening to.
And let me know how many heresies
Yeah, correct us. Yeah, I'm sure someone wants to argue with it. Something we just said. That's pretty, hot topic. All right, folks. Stay safe. Don't get sick. And
good luck finding toilet paper.
Good luck finding toilet paper. See you later.